because as you age, you have to depend on other people. Mm-hmm. And I think that's countercultural to what we want to be in a lot of cases. I think that's what I think that's why other cultures do it better.
Oh, yeah.
In the process of, what it means to take care of our family, in this, because, I'm just thinking about it in the process of, different people, that, with my mom, Chris's mom, and what it's like, how hard it is for, each family to take care of a family member, especially, when you get to that very end stages where they're, very much childlike, infant-like type dynamic. Yeah. It's a real thing, but yet there's gifts to be available there as well. So, yeah.
Teaser.
There you go. Welcome to How I See It with me, Mark Pratt, and
Justin Sternberg. This is a podcast that works to counter cultural polarization through thoughtful conversations.
Brain still worrying.
Exactly. As long as you're not worrying.
Not worrying. Worrying.
Yes.
That's all right.
Yeah. Good morning, Justin.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm worrying. I'm good. How are you?
Your mind is turning.
Yeah.
Yes. You're not worrying, but
That's right.
yeah.
That's right.
That's good. Yeah. It's always good to have something for your mind to chew on for a moment. I think that's a little bit of what this podcast is. Just an opportunity to,
That's right.
Yeah, an appetizer, if you will, just to kind of.
Hopefully not a get your brain gets stuck kind of podcast, but more of a.
Yeah. Speaking of your brain getting stuck.
Yes, just like mine.
Just out of curiosity, if you were to think about it, and granted that we're
think about my brain getting stuck.
Yes,
that's trippy.
I was thinking about your brain getting stuck, but if you were to think about the ability to, like longevity, okay, how long would you want to live? If you had, the ability to, nobody's guaranteed tomorrow, that kind of thing. I respect that. But if you, in your mind, when you kind of picture longevity, legacy, that kind of thing, do you have an age that kind of goes through your mind?
Yes.
Yeah?
Well, no. Well, maybe.
He's still worrying, folks.
That's right. If you could see my face, you'd see the loading spinner.
I gotcha, yes.
I'm actually just started reading this book.
Yeah?
And your question ties right into kind of the introductory first chapter.
Okay.
And the book's called 4,000 Hours, I think.
Okay.
But the concept is, it's a time management book.
Okay.
And so far, the premise, the first chapter, kind of what it's about is flipping time management on its head kind of idea, because so many time management books, and this ties into some of the conversations we've had, I want to say, but so many time management books are about maximizing your productivity and the output, the number of things that you can accomplish in the same finite amount of time.
Okay.
And so far, this again, I'm only in the intro part, but it's saying we have such a finite amount of time. Why are we so worried about maximizing it to fit more stuff in? And when we do that, the other big part of this, the intro is saying, when we do that, when you increase the amount of time you have, you put more stuff in it. Right? So it's like, I'm extra productive, which means I can take on this other thing, which means now I have to be more productive. And so, it's like,
I gotcha.
You clear out your inbox, your email inbox, and it fills right back up, right?
Sure.
And I don't know, it's just like, so far that's kind of the premise. But one of the things it talks about is medieval days, the concept of time wasn't nearly as crucial. You woke up with the sun and you went to bed with the sun, and you followed the natural cycles, and when harvest came, it was time to do harvest stuff, and when the chickens hatched, it was time to do chicken egg stuff.
Yeah.
Like, you followed the seasons and cycles of nature versus
Sure.
kind of these man-made hours.
Yeah.
And another part that I talked about, tying back to your question, it's saying we care so much about the time we're spending because we only have a finite amount. If you had, 10,000 years,
Okay.
you could try everything. You wouldn't be so worried about, am I making the wrong choice with this job choice, or who I'm going to marry, right? It's like, well, they'll die out eventually, or I will, or I don't know.
Gotcha.
But you get what I'm saying? Like, the choices aren't as crucial because you have so much time to consider,
Sure.
alternatives. And so it just made me, I was kind of thinking about that already last night as I was reading that.
Okay.
Just this idea of like, man, yeah, if we had so much more time, there'd be a much more relaxed feeling, I think, in our life.
Would there be?
In this, I don't know. This is this kind of how I'm thinking about it. This idea of it's not all so finite. You know what I mean?
No, and
does that make sense?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
So
and
you don't feel the urgency. I got to get this done because I got to get to that thing because I got to get to that thing, and I don't necessarily know that that's true. That it would relieve us of that, but
I'm not buying that, to be honest with you, right off the bat, because I think we just feel that 10,000 years the same way we feel, in that process. I mean, granted, it's a fun thought to think about, but and I think we have the ability to establish margin even now.
Yes, I think. I haven't read the book yet. I feel like this is going to be part of it, but yeah, I agree. Keep going. Sorry.
No. So I'm still coming back to you. Did you have, in other words, if you can't do the 10,000 year option?
Yeah. I don't know, because it depends on the vitality of the years, right? So if you, like, let's say,
sure,
500 years you could live. So you're...
No, I'm saying in a realistic human spectrum.
Oh, that's what we're doing.
Yes,
okay.
Just in a 500 years wasn't on the option list, neither 10,000, but that's okay.
Okay, up to 120.
Words,
do I get that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, my answer's the same. It depends on the vitality of those years.
Okay.
Like, I really don't care for the idea of living sickly and having others have to, take care of me in that sense. So if it was, a good vitality until I was 65 and then things are going downhill, well, 68's good for me.
I hear you.
Does that make sense? So it's more about,
So would you say
And when I say vitality, I don't necessarily mean being able to do all the same things. I just mean being able to use my mind in a way that, that feels alive versus...
Yeah.
And I don't know what that looks like. I'm not aged to the point where I can understand or empathize with that, but...
Sure.
So it'd be really interesting to hear from the perspective of people who are older and what that looks like for them. But
yeah. And I think, in all honesty, that's just kind of what has prompted this for me, because I do tend to, work with people, aging people, and who wrestle with anxiety or, even dementia and, and these kind of things. Plus, I'd be lying if I'd say, the passing of my mom and, just routinely being in contact with my dad now more so as he's, in this aging process is really kind of piqued my interest in this whole aspect. And I've, I'm not saying I've researched it, but this process of aging, I mean, I like the way you said, aged, because we're all aging, in the reality is we're all aging. So it's not like we get to a point and, oh my goodness, I'm really aging now. Look at this or look at that. That's an indicator of aging.
Yeah.
Because it was funny. I'll change the age to protect the innocent. But, I was working with a kid and, and he was talking about his older sibling being 3 years older than him.
Yeah.
And just that difference because his sibling is, young teenager, adolescent. So, muscle tone is developing, and it's like he's 3 years younger, and it's just impossible, to compete when they were, similar at 5 and 8, maybe, or, it was like competition was a little, but now there's, his older brother is aged to this point where it's like muscle is just, starting to.
Yeah, especially in those teenage years, 3 years makes a difference.
Exactly. Tremendous difference, but so that's still aging, part of that aging process. It was kind of fun to think about. But then, as I was thinking about it, I'm hearing another part that I'm hearing is that part that you're kind of alluding to is that in some ways, my vitality can be connected to my value. And I was, I've been thinking about that process, is that an Americanized, a Western world type thing, whereas I'm tending to lose my, independence and becoming more dependent on other people. I can't do what I used to do for myself. So therefore, my value tends to diminish in that, in this culture, I guess does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And I definitely say that's, a big part of my answer.
Yeah.
In the back of my mind. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like once I stop bringing value, then just pull the cord.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not sure
I
that's
understand it's very harsh. Again, if you're on that other perspective, and reaching that, you're listening and you are, reaching that further end of age or whatever. And I would never mean that for someone else.
Yeah. And that's the thing, Yeah. Because quite often when I'm talking with individuals, it's like my value, I'm not valuable in this state or in this condition. And yet, if we spin that around and to the point of saying, okay, if you had a friend that was experiencing what you're experiencing and going through what you're going through, and you knew that friend, would that friend's value change, for you? It's like, no, of course not. They're still my friend, and I'd have more empathy for them. I'd have more compassion for them. And yet we have a difficult time flipping that back around and extending that same perspective to ourselves.
Which I think also ties into that conversation about our current culture and productivity and, what brings value, right? Is I get stuff done or whatever.
Yeah.
So, I definitely think culturally that shifted where, I don't know, I feel like in previous ages, ages of years.
Okay.
I can't think of the term. Like
previous
the 1700s.
generations.
Yes,
okay.
thank you.
Yes.
Wow. My brain is real just slow today. I don't have any value, Mark.
You do.
Pull the plug.
You do. I'm patient. I'm happy to wait.
So like, previous generations. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I think the mentality was so much different where every family member brought value in different ways. It wasn't just about getting things done.
Yeah.
And there's this honor in age, right? And
sure.
there's this connection with, your older, because you tended to all live in the same, in a lot of cultures in the same, under the same roof, right?
And some cultures still do.
Yep.
Which that's why I was kind of asking that aspect of is it, a Western civilization productivity mindset that has actually devalued aging, or aged,
I'd say absolutely, right?
Well, as I hadn't gone that far, in the whole thing, but it reminded it because it did go to Proverbs 20. 29 something, where it talks about, the splendor of the young is their strength, and the splendor of the, old is their gray hair, or, men is their, gray hair. And to that point, it's like, I don't know as if we're still looking at aging as a splendor,
Yeah.
Anymore. And, I've probably mentioned it before, my whole Caleb type dynamic in Josh, where he talks about being as strong at 85, and therefore he wants this hill country. He wants to, and there's definitely, numbers of people, who have taken on great works or the desire to have a great work, in their 80s.
Yeah.
And it's like, and so that's kind of intrigued this mindset of, okay, what makes that difference, of one person saying, yeah, it doesn't matter. I still want to do, and the other person. And I think where you're at, some of it is that aspect of, vitality, if you would. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, man, yeah, I definitely think the value thing ties directly into my thoughts. Like,
yeah,
I don't think I'm alone, right? I think you already described, like, even talking to
I hope you're not alone. I'm right here.
Older, but alone in my thinking.
Okay.
That as soon as I stop providing value, I don't want to burden anyone. And, I think that's a common maybe thought, but I know that's for sure how I feel.
Yeah.
Whether I think that's right or not, it's just that's definitely how I feel. Like,
but if I may, I'm not trying to be rude or anything, but
no offense.
Would you say that perspective is a biblical perspective?
Oh yeah, I mean, no. I'm not sure if it's anti-biblical either, but
well, that's why.
Yeah.
I mean, this is part of what we do on how I see it.
I think it's, for me, just a selfish perspective. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah. Because also, my perception is that I don't know. Yeah. Just like if I'm just draining to others in that they need to help me and they need, all these things that, as much as they love me, what they love was who I was, not necessarily. Does that make sense?
Oh, it's a little slippery there. What they love is who I was.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm still thinking about it. I think here's the continuum, independence versus dependence.
Yeah.
If I may. And I think there's a point where as we shift further from independence, we tend to think our value declines as we head towards dependence. Mm-hmm. And yet, how many times have you heard of people who have said, you couldn't buy the last 3 months, the last 6 years, the last 2 years, that I had with my parent or whatever, because of the ability that I had to take care of them and spend time with them in a way that I never had before. Mm-hmm. You follow me?
I do follow you.
So it's like that I respect. And I think some of it is a self versus others awareness. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's like the individual, while heading towards dependence, they may tend to think of themselves as devaluing, whereas the individual, the caretaker, and I'm not saying in all cases, I realize there are caretakers who, get tired, but they might even sacrifice themselves even to a degree for the sake of that caring for the other individual, which reflects the fact that the value has not decreased, but yet increased in some ways. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And I realize it's a relational dynamic, mm-hmm. but that's because I think, and here's the difference. I think in some ways it can tie into our comfort with vulnerability. Mm-hmm. We've talked about, granted, and I, as I'm wrestling with this myself, I think, in some cases, it's like Proverbs 25:22, where it talks about, all I can think of as splendor is God. Let's see.
You want me to look it up?
No.
Okay.
In other words, it's basically God is glorified in the hidden things. But it's the glory of God, there you go, to conceal a matter. Okay. But the glory of kings to search a matter out. And I think, not that I'm any king, but this has kind of been a searching out for me, a wrestling, if you will, because like you said, I believe, it's God's glory that our life is so complex. Yeah. It's not that there's just one size fits all type dynamic. You follow me?
Yeah.
So I think that's God's glory, that our life is so complex. There's, different aspects to vitality, even is, my mental health, my physical health, my emotional health, my ability to, do these different things, and, what has an impact on that. I was talking with an individual the other day, and he was saying that social involvement, is the greatest, predictor of long life, which I could agree with. But it was funny when I kind of wanted to fact check that, I kind of typed in longevity, and greatest predictor, and mobility was another one, like you're saying, that vitality, the length of life that my parents, my genetics, if you will, factored into that. Hand strength was another, to where.
Guess I gotta start shaking your hand harder.
But yeah, there was just, it was, I would have loved to have been able to, link one list, but it's more complex than that. It's like that research was saying, mobility and flexibility because they were the exercise group. But yeah, exercise isn't necessarily always at the top of those lists.
Yeah.
But and definitely social involvement versus isolation.
Yeah.
Was definitely, a predictor, for longevity. And granted, I'm not worshiping longevity, but I'm thinking about it in a context of aging. And, and granted, I think, I guess my passion, if you will, in the topic is to be able to recognize, okay, yeah, I can't guarantee that we're going to all live to 85, but yet I believe there are things we can be doing now that might lead to a little more vitality, and I'm not saying that our vitality impacts our worth. Mm-hmm. That's the other wrestling that's kind of been behind this. It's like, no, you still have, and granted, I'm not that person at this point. Mm-hmm. But yet I've also seen, and heard the testimonials from, people, caregivers for individuals, and even, people who are saying, that was, you couldn't trade that time.
Yeah. So at the risk of, how do I put this?
No risk. Just go ahead.
How do you answered the question? What's your comfort level with aging? What is the ideal age? What does it look like? How do you feel about? How comfortable are you with the idea of, having, a broken down body that can't do things, so you depend on others, or a broken down mind that can't quite,
Yeah.
Like how do you feel about those things? What is your gut feeling to those things, and how do you? Does that make sense?
Oh yeah,
Be a little vulnerable with me.
Oh, of course, no sweat. That's why I'm saying there's no risk. I am not a person that I think it would be fun, to be what do you call a person that makes 100 years? There's octogenarian.
Centenarian, right?
Yeah. I think that would be kind of cool.
Yes.
But there again, it's that, do I still have basic faculties to, do that well, because it's like, yeah, but that's not my goal. I'll be honest, it's like, if I could, that'd be cool. But at the same time, yeah, I'm happy to make 90, that kind of thing. And it's funny because as I'm thinking about that, it's like, I'm also recognizing I'm not going to have the same ability. And I think that's where, when I'm talking with people, they had, the premise or the perspective that, yes, I'm going to maintain, all the abilities that I had at 50 right on up through till the day I die, that kind of thing. And that's not reality as far as I'm concerned.
Or at least 60 or at least 70.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I think when they hit those markers or when those other things come, that's a difficult process. And I think,
So again, stop talking about them and talk about you. Is that difficult for you?
That's what I'm actually wrestling with is the ability to recognize, no, I'm okay with the aging process, and granted, I'm also doing that. I'm also looking at that from, my parents' perspective.
Yes.
Both my mom died at 85, my dad's still 89, that kind of thing, to where that's my perspective on it.
And Chris's dad.
Yeah.
Passed away as well.
Yeah, but he's, so like you say,
was pretty young.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that's the benefit, right? To being around situations like that, is it gives you a better perspective on it.
Well, it gives me a perspective. I don't know whether it's better,
Gotcha.
You know what I'm saying?
I may be more comfortable. More present. Yeah, comfortable.
I may be more comfortable with that aging process in the fact that, I recognize, and here again, I'm bringing it back to myself. I have also wrestled with the fact that, when I had those blood clots, and it's like, I think for me, that was a turning point. It's like, nobody's guaranteed tomorrow. And I think I had bought into the lie, if you will, that if I do this, this, and this, and this, I can live to be 100. You follow me? Mm-hmm. And it was like, I was doing those things, and not to be morbid, but I, if things hadn't gone as well as they did, I could have died, at that point. Yeah. It's just a fact.
Yep.
So, I think for me, that was a turning point, because I was able to recognize in some ways, okay, nobody's guaranteed tomorrow, period. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter what you're doing. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what you have. Mm-hmm. Each day is a gift. And so therefore, and yet it's funny, as I was thinking about that gift, how many times. And I think, faith factors into some of these issues, that kind of thing. Sense of purpose,
yes.
And I think that's a difficult thing. I'm saying for myself, it would be difficult.
Me too.
To recognize a sense of purpose if I don't have all my mental facilities type thing. Because I was thinking about it, I think that is part of the splendor of is that wisdom dynamic that older people have. And I think, unfortunately, as a culture, we've tended to devalue that wisdom because so often it's connected with
being out of touch.
Being out of touch, or just being stuck, old fashioned. When in reality, some of that's just plain out wisdom that we could still benefit from today. Yep. And
they could probably tell us why some of the fences were built,
Exactly.
Chesterton's fence.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And to be able to say, you know what, that's probably not such a good idea, because people did that back in the 20s, in this cyclical type, governmental type thing, it's like they've seen some things that we can learn from and say, you know what, no need to reinvent that wheel.
Yeah.
Yeah. The guy, socialism type dynamics, and granted, there's the upgraded socialism of our culture today, but it is kind of interesting to think about how, in a lot of cases, if a person, and I think it can be, on both ends of the spectrum, you talk with a parent of a Down syndrome, it's like that child has no less value. But yet culturally, we can say, well, no, in the womb, this child's going to have these issues and we can dispose of it at this point. And I think we have that same disposable perspective in some cases, as people age. And I just wrestle with that.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And I think if anything, you've this is bad. You've pulled me into the wrestle, right? To kind of be thinking about it, and I can definitely tell you, I haven't been wrestling this, so it's kind of a new concept to me to even think about or wrestle with it. And I can tell you, I don't like the idea of aging. Like, this is my initial wrestling is just like, please no. But you mentioned kind of having the mental faculties diminish is kind of the thing that's less appealing to you. I'd almost rather not know that I don't know. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Than have the mental faculties, but the inability to do something about it. You know what I'm saying?
So if I may, clarification, you would wrestle with having all your mental faculties and then losing your physical ability to implement.
Right. I think so.
Gotcha.
That's right now what feels the most painful thinking about it, right? This idea that, and not only is my mental faculties there in the desire to do things and the knowledge to do things, but I can't physically do them, but I'm also, because my mental faculties are there, I know the drain that I am to others, right? Where, like, I guess I wouldn't mind being a little bit senile because that would, I hope, relieve some of that burden. And I think that's the thing that I'm probably the most afraid of.
For you, though.
In aging, yes, is being a burden.
I gotcha.
And knowing it.
I hear you.
So that's the wrestling that I'll have to do,
I hear you.
as I age, and just recognizing that being a burden isn't always, kind of like what you're saying, that doesn't diminish value.
Yeah.
But it certainly feels that way, right? Because I think that's kind of how our culture it treats each other, and it kind of how we think culturally is like, my values based on what I do. Yeah. My output, my productivity, and the more productive, the more valuable you are. And that's why we listen to people who get a lot of stuff done, and that's why we don't listen to people who don't. You know what I mean? It's like our culture is very much bent towards that. And so for me, it's very difficult to conceive of, or, concede to being a burden and not being productive, like output, not being. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And that's the question, I guess, in some ways. Have we in some ways made productivity a god?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think so.
Yeah. It's an idol, if you will.
Yeah. I mean, I'm very much, again, my brain's kind of tipped towards that because of this book I'm reading, and just it's very much saying the same thing. Again, I don't know, I haven't finished the book, but that's kind of the premise it's setting up. And it's like, it's pretty true. Like, so much about our culture is about how to maximize how much we can do. Yeah. Yeah.
Can you think of a older person that you would, want to live like? I
think that's part of my struggle too. Because of the way our family is, I can't really latch onto some family members and I'm like, that would be okay to be like that.
Oh, really?
Yes. So I think that, because I was thinking about that a little bit earlier. It's just like, I don't really have that. And so what I think about for my kids is just, I don't want that for them, because I can't picture. And my parents aren't quite old enough for that either. Okay. And
This again,
That's also a wrestling too. Is like, how unselfish can I be? Like,
Yeah.
I'm honestly, that brings anxiety, this idea of having to take care of my parents. Because I don't know if I'm that caretaker, right? Like,
I gotcha.
or how good I'll be at that. I'm not going to say I won't do it or whatever. I'm just saying,
Right.
like, so that's part of the picture too. Just like, I don't want my
Yeah.
kids to have to wrestle with that, but I obviously don't have that choice necessarily. So
Yeah.
I'm not saying that, but if I did, you know,
Yeah.
I would definitely choose to live right up until I couldn't be, of value, and then
and granted, I think there are end of life issues. I think, there is I guess in some ways when I think of modern medicine, I think, previous generations, that end of life transition, if you will, there weren't as many options. We couldn't, keep people alive, or they couldn't keep people alive back then to the degree that we can now based on technology.
Yeah.
So I'm going to recognize that as a separate issue. Well, it's tied. It's part of the complexity.
Yeah.
Of that ability that we have to basically not choose when we end our lives, but to a degree choose how much support we do, and I think about that. When I think about support, it does some ways come back to the social, connections that people have, because I think we can tend to underestimate how important that is. And I think, that was something that I was able to see, in my father-in-law and my mom and that kind of thing, how we live in North Carolina. Yeah. And I think it's another thing,
Yes.
Between you and me, that 15 years, give or take, in age makes a big difference.
Yeah, for sure.
As far as cycle of life type things, what's our difference in experience at that point. But I was thinking about it in the context of how, Chris and I live in North Carolina, our parents, New York and Pennsylvania. So we weren't necessarily able, to be, but I was so thankful in that process that really the communities, were so much of the support. And I apologize. Cause, with Chris's dad, her siblings were in that area, that kind of thing. They were tremendous support, but there were also external supports, that came in to, help watch and, at times. And I've definitely noticed it, more with my parents, because my brother's in Pennsylvania, but still 4 hours away. And, it's the people that still plow out their driveway, in the wintertime. And, my dad, is basically saying, yeah, I'm gaining some weight here after your mom. Might be the way he's eating a little bit, but no, he's still eating pretty healthy, but he's still eating food that people have dropped off from, the funeral. And that's been, end of August, so, that kind of thing, those supports.
Yeah.
I think that's a tremendous blessing, when we think about that difference of longevity between, socially engaged and involvement, and versus the isolation. And I think, that can tie in to when we don't see ourselves as valuable, we tend to pull back, and head more towards isolation, because we can't be as independent as we are. And, or as we were.
Yeah, I love the stories that I heard about your mom. Just, if I'm gonna get old, I want to get old like your mom. Is that fair?
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, and she didn't seem to intentionally isolate. Like, and I don't know. I just, a lot of things you said, people would kind of beeline to her at church to connect with her and just stuff like that. And I think that would definitely be a desire of mine as I age, is to be involved engaged in community and have that value. That without a doubt was obvious with your mom, right?
Yeah.
And I think So when I think about the value, again, this is all.
Yeah.
This is why I'm so slow. It's like I'm just thinking it all out. I would say I've given this less thought than just about anything else we've talked about, which is
in all
maybe
fairness,
dangerous,
like
but-
you say, it was something to we I kind of sprung on you a little bit. We
Well,
had it
yeah.
as a topic, but
Yeah.
it wasn't something that
Yeah. Most of the time, though, things I've thought a lot more about. And this one, I would just say it's. I think I avoid thinking about this honestly.
That's fair.
Because I think it does. It brings anxiety to me to this idea of being a drain on society,
Yeah.
specifically my family. But
I
kinda go back-
like the fact, not that you're feeling anxious, but I like the fact that you're able to express that because it's like, okay, what do we need to do in
Yeah.
some ways to reverse as people are aging that this fear dynamic, and granted, my ability to have children, if I did or didn't have children, who's going to take care of me and what, I respect that's all out there. But at the same time, I guess, like you say, it's just a passion for me that people don't necessarily connect that value with vitality.
yeah.
But,
Well,
and I think
vitality too. I think it's also important to define that.
agreed. And that's where,
Because, yeah.
I was thinking, like you were sharing with my mom, she
Yeah.
had all of her mental facilities. She may not have been able to do it physically, but it was that mental capacity that was there, to be able to connect and engage and that kind of thing in such a way that made it, possible. And I think, with Chris's dad, he still had, much of his mental capabilities, and, it was his physical body that was, giving out in the process of the cancer type stuff. So it was a different,
Yeah, I think, again, just going back to her mom, it sounds like she was very engaged with others and very considerate of others. So she didn't really, again, this is all based on your story. So you could have coded this, but just I get this perception that she wasn't trying to draw everyone into her life. She was trying to connect in theirs.
Sure.
And so the value, but then as a result, people also cared about her, but that wasn't her goal and that wasn't her desire. And I think for me, as I wrestled with this in the moment, like I think I want to be of that mind to be about still being engaged with others and trying to like ask them questions about their life and kind of, I just whacked my mic.
See, you're getting compassionate. You're getting passionate about this now. You're starting to talk with your hands.
That's right. But yeah, being able to connect with others and I don't want to say bring value in that way, but bring value even to my own life to serve others and to feel like, yeah. So I think, but again, if the mental facilities decline to where I can't really do that, maybe it's okay because I won't realize it.
I hear you.
And that's, but if I can't do stuff with my hands, at least like someone wheel me to the church or whatever so I can ask, how that kid's doing or whatever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, to
Good
me,
see
that's kind of,
And remember the person's name, hopefully.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Which, again, it's interesting to perceive, like, the beginning with the end in mind, kind of fast forwarding to the end and thinking about it. When I think about it through the lens of your mom and the stories you've told, it's like that feels more palatable. But I don't necessarily see anything like that in my culture where I live.
I got you.
Where we are,
I hear you.
Think about our church. I don't think of someone older in that kind of state where people kind of make a beeline to that person. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And so it's just kind of hard for me to picture it.
I got you.
I definitely don't think it's impossible. I'm just saying that I think that's part of what makes it harder to wrestle with. It's just like, how do I fit in the culture that I'm in right now when I'm no longer who I am? At this age.
Who I am right now.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And I just think that's not something to even worry about, right?
No,
I think.
And I think it's interesting when we think about the aging process, you know, it's like who I am right now. Well,
will you take care of me when I'm decrepit and you're 100 and an octogenarian?
I will see what I can do, Justin.
Okay.
I will see what I can do.
Because I think you're going to be more. All right. It's on record, folks. If he's not taking care of me in my decrepit state.
I will say part of the aging process for me, probably one of the bigger factors I've noticed is my eyesight.
Okay.
So like you say, I can't guarantee, you know.
By the time you're 100, they can probably replace your eyeballs, so it's okay.
But like you say, I'll do my best to keep your beard, you know, as coiffed as you keep it. You know, it's like your hairstyles are pretty high maintenance for a man that can't see well.
Yeah, you can just tell me it looks good. That's what I mean. I won't really know because I'll be in that state.
So, like you say, yeah, as long as Megan can still do your hair for you, we're good shape.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, I honestly hope I outlive her so she doesn't have to deal with me in that state. I'm gonna be honest.
Yeah. Well, that was another thing. You know, it's like Chris and I had that little couples type contract early on that, you know, I had agreed, you know, in some ways to pass away after her.
Yeah.
You know, that, you know, and I think other couples do that. But when when I got the PE there, you know, it was like pulmonary embolism.
Oh,
blood clot. Right. Sorry. But, you know, when I had that issue, it's like, okay, I can't guarantee, you know, and it really was kind of a, you know, and maybe that's a part of what has, you know, in combination with, you know, my mom and Ernie, you know, and my dad and, you know, Linda is, you know, surviving, you know, partners for, you know, spouses. It just makes me think about that as far as, you know, what the next years look like, you know.
Yeah.
And it's just, and I think that's the difficult part for me, because you were talking about even our church, but, you know, like Ray Moore would be somebody, you know, that you just routinely, you know, aging person who you just routinely look forward to seeing. And, you know, when they walk into a room, it's like, you know, people make the effort, because granted, he's made the effort. Yeah. You know, in that case, you know, because he'll, you know, routinely ask about the kids, you know, when we see him and that kind of thing. So just kind of thinking about that, you know, that there. And the other thing I was thinking, based on what you want to, you know, maintain what you have right now in comparison to other people that you are surrounded by, you know. And I think as we age, it's like, you're okay with where you're at right now. And granted, as long as the majority of the people stay around you that are around you, you know, another 10 years, it might still be very similar. You follow me?
No.
Well,
but I'm trying.
It's okay.
I'm with you.
In other words, picture yourself at my age.
Yeah.
Okay. Your lifestyle probably isn't going to change a whole lot more, even though you may be thinking it will. You know, you want to maintain what you have right now. That's what I thought I heard.
No, I think I'm okay with getting into 60s, 70s.
Oh, okay.
Like, I think I'm okay with the kind of the declining abilities, but at a reasonable amount. You know, like I'm not afraid of that, really.
Okay.
It's really about the cliff that brings me the nervousness. Is like, yeah, I have a stroke and now, like, you know, I need assistance with things, and, you know, or mentally it's like, what day is it? You know, I don't know. Like, there's some of those, that cliff is what makes me nervous. I think if it's a slow decline, I don't know. I feel like that's what I've been dealing with for the last 10 years, right? So it's like,
sure. And
I think obviously the pace of that increases the older you get, but I'm just saying, I don't think that's what really makes me nervous as much as, well, yesterday, you know, he was a stalwart in our community, and today we now have to take care of him, you know. And maybe it's a day, maybe it's over the course of a year, quick decline, whatever that. But I'm saying that kind of that cliff nature is really the thing that I kind of wrestle with, that anxiety. But I don't know if that. I think for me, ultimately, you mentioned this earlier, it's about faith, right? It's about,
Faith is definitely a factor.
you don't control this. I don't control this.
Nope.
I think if I had imagined in your mind's eye, you're this guy out in the garage doing, tinkering, doing things, even when you got, you're bent over and can barely stand straight, but you're still out there nailing some wood or whatever. Like
Tinkering.
Yeah, tinkering. Exactly. I think that's kind of your perception. My perception is hopefully something like that too.
I hear you.
But it's like, we don't have any control over that vision or becoming reality.
Yep.
I'm also not belittling that vision. I think began with the end in mind. I think there's something to be said about I'm going to live to be tinkering in my garage till I'm 100. I think there's something about that idea that can keep you keep your vitality to a degree. But back to what I was saying, we don't have any control.
Agreed.
And
I'm not saying we do. And I think if anything, I want to recognize what we do that conveys value to the aging, in that process of so often, I think it's difficult to maintain that, that perspective of having value when I am no longer, when I am no longer productive. I want to separate vital from productive, because I believe everybody is vital. Yeah. But even when they're not seemingly productive, yes, from an output standpoint. Yeah.
Another recent example that's very real for me would be Gene.
Sure.
Good friend of ours who was very involved with us at CR, and he and I had tons of awesome conversations and kind of were accountability partners to a degree and stuff like that. And as a result, I got to know him and his life really well, and I got to learn a ton from him. It was just really I really value that relationship, and I always will. Yeah. And, he played music, he played the fiddle, and he would play with us at CR. And I mean, those are my favorite memories, playing music by far, is being up there on stage with him, him playing the fiddle or the steel guitar. He killed the steel guitar too. For a minute there. And then there was a cliff where he just couldn't play fiddle like that anymore, and he would stumble through it, and he'd have to get help up on the stage and help back off, and I saw that kill him. You know what I mean? I saw that inability to do the things he loved just mentally break him down. And I think he basically said, "That's it, I'm done." And it was within a year, 2 years, or whatever that he passed away, and that's one of the closer examples I have of dying from old age, basically, right? Because I've had people die in my life that were, older, but typically it was a sickness or, kind of like we said, I think with Ernie, where the cancer, it's like there's a villain there and you can kind of chalk it up to that, and that feels a little bit different than just kind of old age decline. Decline, yeah. Sure. And I look at what he went through, and I was like, I don't want that either. I know he didn't want it, and he was like, this is taking too long to die. What's going on? Get me out of here. And I think very much as a man who had such a rich life, when he's, again, that ability to output stopped, he just wanted out. And I think that's definitely, I relate to that, and I feel like that's how I feel about it. And yet, again, we don't control that. And
do you think, I'm just asking a philosophical question. Do you think there is, when we think about a loving God, like we talk about, do you think there is, he takes that into consideration in that part?
I think so.
I hear you.
I mean, yes, I believe so. But I also know that he does things we don't want all the time.
I get it.
Right. So there's this
things
balance,
that causes growth. And I think
Yep.
sometimes, when we think about the fruits of the Spirit, all that, I think that process can also increase our patience. Yeah. Our ability to say, okay, God, and there again, faith is a part of that. Yes. that process. And I can understand, people who don't have a faith, will definitely wrestle more with anxiety in that process of what comes next type thing. And I feel for people like that. Don't get me wrong. I have, compassion for them. And, that's where I guess that's another part of that desire that I have to convey. No, your life has purpose and it does have value, and you're still here because maybe you need to understand a little more of what, the purpose is for your life, to be able to have relationship with Jesus Christ in that process. And it's, from my perspective, it's to your benefit that you're still here.
Yeah.
If you're if you're not ready, if you don't have relationship with Jesus Christ to, spend eternity, with him, that kind of thing. So it's just, Yeah.
And I think that definitely, that's part of the conversation as well, certainly, because as believers, it's like, as soon as my life here is not such that I feel good, take me to the next one, because this is way better. Get you. It's like, so that's part of it too. But again, just all of this kind of, for me, comes back to faith, and I don't have control. And, if I end up being the sick person that has to be taken care of, basically the scenario I don't want, I still trust God in that. I still trust he has a purpose in it, that my kids are meant to learn something from that the caretakers involved, like that there's purpose in it.
Sure.
I know that's true.
I hear you.
I 100% have faith that that's what he's meant for me, if that's how it's supposed to go. That doesn't mean that's what I want. I want the opposite, right? Like, I want to be vital and then dead. That's what I want.
Yeah.
Like a good, clean car crash right when I hit 85 would be good.
Be careful what you ask for. But no, I hear where you're coming from.
Or, you know, fall asleep and then you don't wake up. I mean, that's always the dream.
No, I get you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
but again, I can say after wrestling for 1 hour that I'm okay with whatever it's going to be. I've surrendered it, right? Like, and I think that's, but it'll be an ongoing wrestling as I do age and as it becomes more real. But, ultimately I'm okay with however it goes, because I know it's part of his plan.
Sure.
And if my kids go through the hardest time taking care of me, it's probably good for them. Based on who they are right now, I can say they can learn to serve a little bit. Okay.
That's fair. Yeah. I'm saying that's fair as far as you're being their father and casting down that view. But yeah. No. So know that your life has value, even as you, lose productivity, Justin, in that. And so we'll have to do an update. We'll have to catch an update on your book that you're reading to see
where it goes.
See where it goes.
Hopefully it's so good that I can't help but make you do an episode on it.
So. Well, I'm willing to be a part of it. But so I appreciate, just know that I appreciate your wrestling this morning in that process. And
I appreciate yours, the wrestling you've done to kind of bring into this conversation. It's good stuff.
And granted, I don't think our listenership is that aged according to our, but doing what you can to think about the plan for the end with the beginning, plan for the beginning with the end in mind. So think about it in that process of, how am I planning for my future? Not that God isn't in control of it, but
what kind of old person do you want to be, and how can you work towards that right now? For me, it's relational. So
I do think it's fair that, people tend to age as I interact with people. I think tend to be two groups, those people who are less fearful and therefore are more engaged, and those who are more fearful and kind of tend to be more cantankerous, if you will. Because I think it does come back to viewpoint in some ways, as far as, if it's mine to control, and I can't control what my body is doing and the way it's falling apart, that's a difficult process.
Mm-hmm.
But if we can basically say, okay, there's a purpose in it, even in, the circumstances, I think that frees us up to be able to say, okay, this is my body for God to use, that kind of thing. And here again, I don't know whether you and I have shared it, but, over the mic, but as I was thinking about that, as, it came to mind as I prayed, over my mom's grave, because I realized the internment, if you will. I realized, we were putting her physical body in the ground. She was no longer there, but I was able in that moment to recognize how God had gifted her with that physical body in such a way that she used it, and God used it in her life to make her who she was, in her spirit as her, what I'm saying, to where, and so in some ways that's my view of, our limitations, to where, I think we see limitations as being wrong, bad, but yet, so often it is the limitations that make us into something better.
Who you are.
Yeah, who we are. Yeah. And I think, in that, my process is my desire would be to be able to be a joy-filled person, even as I experience the limitations that come with the aging process. Yeah. That's my, and so therefore, do I get frustrated when I bang my head against the other side of a closet because I can't get my eyes far enough away from something to see it like I used to? Sure, I do. But, it's like, okay, Mark, you got to get a stronger light. You got to get your readers on. You got to do something. And I still get frustrated with that when I can't do what I once did. Yeah. But yet I've also come to the realization that, I'm not as strong physically as I once was. But, it's like, okay, there's no use blowing your back out again just to think you're still as strong as you were. Yeah. So I wrestle with those things. Don't get me wrong in that aging process, but I'm also able to say, okay, God, how are you developing the fruits of the Spirit in my life based on this? And it does come back to, okay, I got to ask somebody for help. I got to ask one of those strong young men who's, splendor is John, or Lizzie, at times Chris. I'll quite often rely on Chris. It's like, okay, she's right there. What does that say? Because I can't see it anymore, to the degree that I once did, but I am learning in that way to depend on, Chris, and, it's like, hey, John, okay, I'm not asking you to blow your back out either, but, between the two of us, I can contribute my 25% and, that kind of thing. So it is and I will say at this point, I think I'm learning to value. I know you kind of refer to me as the lone wolf person, but I think in some ways I am processing the value of that in that process of, I can, but is it now a greater strength of mine to be able to unify some people and say, hey, can I have a hand? Can we do this? Because there's a lot to be said for that as well. So like you say, I mean, it's a glory of God to conceal a matter. It's the glory of kings to search it out.
That's right.
Yeah.
You're doing it.
Well, I'm working on it. I can't see
dragging me along for the ride.
Does that make sense in the process of things?
It does.
Yeah.
I had a vivid and hilarious and begin with the end in mind vision.
Yeah.
That I'll share before we drop.
Yeah.
I just had this idea of like being very involved relationally and yet not having all my facilities, and I just envision accidentally peeing myself. And I want to be the guy who makes hilarious jokes about that, and everyone in the room to remember that and like hold on to that for when they're old. Does that make sense? Like that's the kind of old I want to be.
Yes.
You know? That
you don't take yourself too seriously.
Yeah. And like this is part of the deal.
Yeah.
You know? And I'm gonna work on my jokes for that.
You've just relieved some of your own anxiety about that process.
That's part of the wrestling. So
yeah.
That's my end of life vision. Is
nice.
relieving myself.
Nice
publicly,
job.
Accidentally. And, leave him with a good joke as I exit, or as I'm wheeled out by someone else.
There you go. Justin will be saying something about that sock was getting a little too dry.
I'll have to look that joke up.
Wow, no, that's off the cuff. So like I say, you won't find it out there. But yeah, I can respect your sense of humor in that process.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's how I see it.
Thanks for sharing, Justin.
Yeah, thank you.
No
Thanks for
problem.
bringing it up.
That's how we see it.
Hey, thank you for listening to our podcast. If you like How I See It, please do all the things that podcasts tell you to do. Subscribe, rate, review, follow us, and or talk nicely about us on social media. If you want to reach out, the email is us@howiseeit.click. Yep, I said .click, as in .click. Please tell your friends about this show, and we'll see you on the next one.